Okay, I think I'm in focus. So I'm just gonna do it. Hey, I'm a big fan of the Beatles. I think it's pretty obvious by my shirt, and if you know how my room is decorated by my room tour video, it's pretty obvious that I like the Beatles. And I recently watched half of a video that was the worst song on every Beatles album and the best song on every Beatles album. And I honestly disagree with the whole worst best thing on every Beatles album, mainly because not only are all the songs so different from each other, so it's impossible to say what the best Beatles song on every album is and what the worst song on every album is. And it's never blatantly obvious of that fact. So I was like, I'm not satisfied with that video. So this video is instead going to be my favorite Beatles song on every album and my least favorite Beatles song on every album. To avoid me saying this is the best song or this is the worst song, because in my opinion, that's all really subjective, and favorite, well, that's just like my personal thing, and it's not really a fact, that's just like my opinion. So yeah, first Beatles album, Please Please Me. This was their first album they released, and it is one of my favorites. I love this album so much. I'm going to be using my Beatles CDs for this so that I can look at the track list on the back. So I want to start with my least favorite song on the album. And it's very hard because most Beatles albums are basically good back to front. I think for my least favorite song on this album, I'd have to go with A Taste of Honey. I know that's going to be a little controversial because A Taste of Honey is so good, and I agree that it's a very good song. I'm just thinking of whenever I'm listening to my Beatles playlist, which song am I most likely to skip on a Beatles album, and I think A Taste of Honey is usually the one I go with. I know that it technically, like, they didn't write A Taste of Honey, so I mean, I guess not really their fault, but like, I don't know. It's a little slow. Maybe if it was faster, I'd like it better. Yeah, so that's what I'm gonna have to go with, but honestly, they're all pretty good, so it's pretty hard to choose. And I think my favorite song on Please Please Me, my favorite song on Please Please Me, I think is going to be the title of the album, Please Please Me. I think that's gonna be my favorite song on this album. I love the harmonies. I think they work so well. There's a reason why when it came out, everyone loved it. Please Please Me, that is a song I will never skip when it comes on my Beatles playlist. I also want to give a shout out to I Saw Her Standing There. That's the opening track for this album, and I also think the song is really good. But yeah, Please Please Me, that's my favorite one. Sorry, A Taste of Honey. I love you. You're great, but you know, that's just a video. My next Beatles album is with the Beatles. Yay! Such an iconic cover. Like, you see people parodying this all the time, and it's just like, ugh, so good. This is another album where I find it extremely hard to find a least favorite because they're all pretty much consistently good, and I am a huge fan of early Beatles music. People like to say, like, people like, and I get it. I get why you think later Beatles music is better, obviously, but like, early Beatles, just, so good. I love the, like, early 60s rock type music, and the Beatles just do it so well. Like, there's a reason why they were, like, the most popular band ever, because they're awesome. I think I'm unfortunately going to have to crown my least favorite song on this album as Hold Me Tight. I love that song, and I feel really bad. I'm very sorry, Hold Me Tight, and I'm sorry to Ringo, I keep covering up his head with my hand. I am sorry, Hold Me Tight, I love you, you're a bop. And I mean, like, every song on this album is pretty darn good, so it's really hard to choose again. I just think that if I'm looking at the whole list of all of them comparatively, I think Hold Me Tight, unfortunately, is the one that I like the least on this album. I don't really have a reason why. I just think because I think it's because I like all the other songs on this album so much that Hold Me Tight is just, unfortunately, my least favorite. But that doesn't mean I don't like it, but unfortunately, I have to pick a loser, and that's gonna be the one. I think my favorite song on this album, has to be, oh, it's so hard. I'm gonna choose Not a Second Time. I love Not a Second Time. I love the tune of it. I really like how the song, I feel like, is structured in a way that's different than every other song on this album. I really like how the tune just kind of flows in on itself. I love Not a Second Time. It is so good. I could listen to that song forever. I want to also give a shout out to All My Loving. I really like the harmonies on that. But I think I have to crown Not a Second Time as being my favorite song on this album. The next album that is on our list is A Hard Day's Night. Yay! This is the soundtrack, well, at least a side of this is the soundtrack to the movie they released, A Hard Day's Night, which is one of my favorite movies. It is their best movie they released, in my opinion. I think this is another one. I'm gonna say this for every single one besides maybe the White Album. Sorry, White Album, but every single song on this album is pretty solid, so it's really hard to find a least favorite, but if I had to choose, which I do for this video, I would say that my least favorite track on this album is You Can't Do That. It's a really good track. I just think, again, comparatively to all the other songs on this album, it is my least favorite. Not to say it's bad, because it's really good, and I think it's pretty funny. Unfortunately, You Can't Do That is going to be my least favorite. There's better Beatles songs than it. That's just all I have to say about it, but it's pretty good. I think my favorite song from this album has to be If I Fell. I love their harmonies. The Beatles really bring it when it comes to harmony. Like, John and Paul's voice just meld so well together, and I think that If I Fell is a really good example of Beatles harmonies, and I think that it's very pretty. I also want to give a shout out to a few other songs that I really like on this album. And I Love Her is a really sweet Paul McCartney love song. I love that song so much. It's very cute. I'll Cry Instead, I just have to say, is kind of relatable, and I really love it also. There has to be one winner, and I think If I Fell is going to take the cake. The next album we're going to talk about is Beatles for Sale. Hope I didn't mess up the focus when I did that. This is not an album that I grew up with. For some reason, my parents did not own this album when I was growing up. So I discovered this album pretty late in my Beatles journey. I know it now, and I know every song on it pretty well because it is a really good album. I think my least favorite song on this album is Everyone's Trying to Be My Baby. I know they didn't write it, but it's still on the album, so George sings this one, and I really like it when George sings songs. I think that comparatively, again, to every other song on this album, it just is lesser, and for some reason they put like a weird reverb effect on his voice in it, which I didn't think they need. And whenever he like makes like the S sound, the reverb does weird stuff, and I'm not a fan of the vocal effect they put on his voice. My favorite song on this album, ooh, there's so many good ones. I think my favorite song on this album has to be What You're Doing. Oh my god, that song rocks. That guitar riff, oh, so good. What You're Doing, I love the guitar riff so much. And it's such a fun, funky song. I know there's definitely songs that people would classify on this album as being better than What You're Doing, but it's just, I don't think it doesn't get old for me. Like, What You're Doing I could listen to forever. I want to give a shout out to I'll Follow the Sun. I'll Follow the Sun I think is a very underrated Beatles track, and it's very cute and I love it. I'm a Loser, it's very relatable. I think I have to give it to What You're Doing. I think What You're Doing is so good, and I could listen to it forever, so yeah. Our next album, we get to a pivotal point in the Beatles' career, is Help. This is the album where they really started to, I think, leave the early 60s rock sound and really develop, you know, their own thing. There really isn't a bad song on this album. Every single song on this album is absolutely great. But if I had to choose, which I do for this video, I think, unfortunately, my least favorite song has to be Dizzy Miss Lizzy. I love Dizzy Miss Lizzy. I think it is such a fun song, but unfortunately, every single other song on this album is so good that I have to choose an amazing song like Dizzy Miss Lizzy as my least favorite. I think my favorite song on this album is You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. I love it. I don't know what it is about it. It might be a mix of nostalgia and like just the fact that it's so different than all the other ones. I think it's just so iconic, and I think that everyone talks about a lot of the songs on Help. Help is a very popular album, and people talk about all the songs on it all the time. But I think You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, I think is a very interesting song, and people don't talk about it all that much in comparison to all the other ones. So that is the one I'm going to be going with. I want to give a shout out to the title track, Help. It's very good, but it kind of got old, and then I got tired of it. So that one will not be my favorite. And I also want to give a shout out to Yesterday. That is a huge song on this album. It is such a good song, and everybody loves it. It's just so overplayed. I will usually skip it if it comes on my playlist because I've heard Yesterday probably 100 bazillion times, and I still go, okay, I get it, it's Yesterday. But I love it. It's such a good song. I will love it forever, and every once in a while I do listen to it, and it does help me. Sometimes I do feel in the mood, and it is a very relatable song. Unfortunately, it's been played to death so it will not be getting the title as my favorite. That goes to You Got to Hide Your Love Away. I'm really trying to go through this quickly so my camera doesn't die. I hope it does. If it dies during this, I'm gonna be so mad. I'm gonna have to, the frame's gonna change. I'll let you know if that happens. Now we have reached a pivotal album in the Beatles' career and also my listening to them. It is Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul was the Beatles album that got me into the Beatles. I say that in air quotes because I've always been into the Beatles, but Rubber Soul was the one that really jump-started my obsession. I would say this album means a lot to me. And it also is a very important album in the Beatles' sound journey. It's like a really nice in-between Help and Revolver of like their musical style, and I really like it. But unfortunately there must be a loser, and I think that the loser is going to be Girl. No offense to anyone whose favorite song is Girl, there has to be a bottom, and Girl, you know, I would usually skip it. I'm not gonna lie, it's just really slow and it's kind of boring. I think that them saying tit a lot in the song is funny, but it's not enough for me to want to listen to it. I think my favorite song on this album is If I Needed Someone. I love that song so much. The guitar riff is so good and catchy. I love the harmonies. The fact that George wrote it, it gives it points in my book because I think that George's songwriting is impeccable. I want to give a special shout out to You Won't See Me and Nowhere Man. Those two are probably tied for second place. Those two are both so good. Also Think for Yourself and The Word. Honestly, I could probably name every song on this album as a special shout out. If I Needed Someone, that is my favorite song on this album. The next album we have is Revolver, and this is a lot of people's favorite albums. If you talk about what is your favorite Beatles album, Revolver gets brought up all the time because Revolver released and broke everything. Everyone's brain exploded when Revolver was released, and no one's recovered since then. Late Beatles stuff is very experimental sounding. Revolver, it is still grounded in reality, but it is starting to get nuts. It is starting to get crazy. Stuff happened on Revolver that had never happened before and probably didn't happen since. Also, the cover design, I think that Revolver is definitely my favorite Beatles cover. You know, it's like an I Spy. You could just look at it forever and just continue looking at it and find new things. I still find new things in the Revolver cover, and I've been staring at it for years and years. This one was also with Rubber Soul next to my CD player, so this one I would also listen to over and over and over and over again. I basically have the track lists memorized in order because that's just how I would listen to this album. I just put on my headphones and just like listen to it like Saturday morning. It's just, ugh. Such good memories with Revolver. And George gets 3 songs on this album. I mean, come on, you're spoiling me over here. But unfortunately, there has to be a bottom, and that is And Your Bird Can Sing. For me, that is my least favorite. And Your Bird Can Sing is a really, really good song. I don't know what it is about it that makes it less appealing to me than every other song on this album, but if I'm, again, listening to my Beatles playlist and it comes on, I might skip it every once in a while because it just doesn't do as much for me as every other song on this album. I think I'm gonna have to say my favorite song on this album is Tomorrow Never Knows. I don't know why I feel like that's kind of a generic thing to say. I mean, it definitely takes some getting used to. I remember the first time I heard Tomorrow Never Knows, I was like, what the heck did I just listen to? But once I listened to it a few times, it kind of like unlocked in my brain how awesome it was. Not only is Tomorrow Never Knows, I believe, the first song to ever use tape loops. It's just so good. I think that no one has ever been able to produce a song quite like it before or since. So it just activates musical neurons in my brain that just like fire all at once whenever I listen to it, and I'm just like, whoa. So Tomorrow Never Knows has to be my favorite song on this album. Some special shout outs go to Taxman, also to Yellow Submarine. That song I feel like is the song everybody knows. And I also want to give a special shout out to Here, There, and Everywhere. That's probably my second favorite song on the album. Very good song. Here, There, and Everywhere. That would be my favorite if Tomorrow Never Knows was not on this album, but it is. So, yeah. Revolver, yay! And now we get to another groundbreaking album. I think I'm gonna say that for like every album, but really groundbreaking, Sgt Peppers. Probably my second favorite Beatles cover. It is so good. It is a concept album, This album is so good. This is one that you could listen from front to back and never get bored. You could listen to it 5 zillion times and never get bored because it's just so good. Unfortunately, there must be a bottom. There must be a song on here that I like less than all the other ones, and it's going to be a little controversial, but I'm going to say that it is Fixing a Hole. I know everyone's going to attack me. How dare I say that Fixing a Hole is worse than all the other ones. Alright, my camera died, y'all, so the continuity's a little bit screwed up. But, you know, that's just show business. Anyway, I was talking about Fixing a Hole, I believe I said was my least favorite on this album. I really like the imagery that Fixing a Hole brings, but unfortunately, I'm just going to compare it to all the other songs on this album, and honestly, Fixing a Hole, it just, for me, doesn't tickle that little musical itch in my brain as well as the other songs from this album do. My favorite song on this album is Lovely Rita. That's such a weird thing to say. I feel like I have such weird opinions because, like, there's so much iconic tracks on this album, like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Sends Me. Ugh, that song is so good. She's Leaving Home. That song I feel like is pretty underrated and it's an absolute banger. Within You Without You, Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, I mean, come on, that's probably second favorite for me. But Lovely Rita, there's something about it that is just perfect. It might be one of the most perfect songs I've ever heard. It's just got such good energy and it just makes me feel nice and so good. I love Lovely Rita and I will die on this hill that Lovely Rita is not only my favorite song on Sgt. Peppers, but the best song. Actually, no, that's not true. That's not true. It's not the best song. A Day in the Life is the best song. But A Day in the Life is a good third place. Within You Without You, probably second. And then favorite song, Lovely Rita. Don't judge me, it's good. My next album that I'm gonna talk about, I don't remember if this came out after or before Sgt. Peppers, because whenever you like get a list of Beatles albums, they leave Magical Mystery Tour out of it because it was released as a double EP, which technically isn't an album, but not only do I think that this definitely is an album, it's long enough to be an album, it's substantially, like, got enough songs to be an album. It's basically, thematically, it's an album. It's an album of songs. And the reason why I say this is an album is because this is one of my favorite albums. This, when I was a child, like, little kid, this album is what got me into the Beatles then. This album is what helped me discover, oh, the Beatles aren't just something that my parents play in the car. They're a good band with good music. Like, this is the one that did it. I unfortunately have to choose the least favorite song on it, which, you know, actually isn't very hard. It's Baby You're a Rich Man. I don't care about that song. It's boring. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I think it's a boring song. Some people a lot of like actual musicians might disagree with me on that because it's very musically intricate, but to me, it does not do anything for me. So that's actually pretty easy. I think my favorite on this has to be I Am the Walrus. One of my earliest memories is discovering I Am the Walrus, that song, and absolutely loving it. Just loving how weird the lyrics were. Like, to a child, like, the weird lyrics are oddly appealing. I'm the Walrus. I can listen to that song and find something new within that song every single time I listen to it. I also want to give a shout out to the title track, Magical Mystery Tour. That song I was obsessed with probably when I was like 7. Also want to shout out Strawberry Fields Forever, probably one of the Beatles' best songs they've ever written. I Am the Walrus is my favorite track on this song. It's so good and I will never ever get tired of listening to it. So next I'm going to talk about the notorious White Album. Boom! I've got 2 CDs because it's a double album, so I have 2 CDs. I'm actually gonna do this disc 1, disc 2 version because I don't feel like holding 2 CDs at once. See, the White Album is funny in the fact that it has some of the best Beatles songs ever to have came out ever of all time. And it also has some of the worst Beatles songs ever to come out of all time. This is when they decided that they were going to do something completely different and they were going to try some new things, and it did not work every time. You know, sometimes it didn't work. And you know what? Sometimes, even when you're the Beatles, you make things that don't work. That's just how it goes. So, my least favorite on disc 1 is going to have to be Wild Honey Pie. That's actually my least favorite Beatles song, fun fact. I don't care if there's a cool story behind it. Put it on Anthology if you want it so bad. 100% will always skip it on my Beatles playlist. It's obnoxious, it doesn't sound good, it really doesn't add anything to the album at all besides making the White Album more White Album-y. It's not a good song, like, I'm sorry. But interesting, we got breaking news here, because I was looking at these tracks and I was hoping that they would be split up on the disc, but they aren't. So I actually cannot choose, and I have a tie for this disc on what my favorite song on the White Album in general and this first disc is. It is a tie between Back in the USSR and While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Both of those songs are some of the Beatles' best songs ever. Like, While My Guitar Gently Weeps is probably my second favorite George Harrison song ever. It's so good. And it just, like, I'm having a hard time putting into words what it's like just because of how awesome it is. I melt, man. I melt when I listen to that song. And then Back in the USSR is just it just rocks. It just rocks! I think it's pretty obvious that I like fast-paced songs. Like, I've named as my favorite song some slow songs, but like, faster the song is, the more often like I will like it, and the energy that Back in the USSR has. It's like impossible for me to put into words how much I love Back in the USSR. Those two are tied for first, and then I want to give a shout out to Obla Di Obla Da. Some people don't like that song, but I do. And I also want to shout out Don't Pass Me By. Ringo wrote that one! Yay! One of the two songs Ringo wrote throughout his entire career with the Beatles, and Don't Pass Me By is one of them. Alright, now we're talking about disc 2. My least favorite on this is pretty obvious. Revolution 9. Everyone knows that Revolution 9 is just kind of a mess. I can respect the intentions behind it. You know, he's an artist, and artists make weird art sometimes. But is it for me? No. Is it for anyone? Probably not. But, you know, it's for John, and he can have that. My favorite song on this album, on this disc of the album, is probably Mother Nature's Son. I really like that song. It's very cute and very calming, and whenever I listen to it, I mean, I feel like it's one of those songs it's impossible to feel stressed while listening to it. I also want to give a special shout out to Good Night. I love that song, and it's always nice to have your favorite Beatle, Ringo Starr, sing a lullaby to you when you want to go to sleep. Revolution 1, while inferior to the single Revolution, I also really like this version. If this was the only version of Revolution we got, we would probably like it more, but because Revolution, the single, is so much better than it, unfortunately people don't talk about it. But I like the shooby-doo-bops that you get in Revolution 1. Helter Skelter, I love that song. You know I love energetic songs. It almost beat Mother Nature's Son to my favorite, honestly. The iconic Ringo Starr, I've got blisters on my fingers. I mean, come on, it's iconic. But Mother Nature's Son squeaks out because I feel like it gets talked about less, and I kind of like that more. Alright, now that we've got the White Album out of the way, we can get back to the good stuff. And by the good stuff, I mean Yellow Submarine. Remember that song on Revolver we talked about? Well, now it's an album. This is kind of this, I think this is the soundtrack for the Yellow Submarine movie. And how iconic is this? I mean, come on. A lot of the songs on this album are repeats of songs on other albums, so those aren't going to count in my favorite or least favorite. I'm only going to count the songs that were on Yellow Submarine new. I kind of like every single song they added. I think that every single song they added is not the worst song of this album. But there must be a loser, and I think it's going to be... Okay, so I actually just re-listened to the song that I said was my least favorite on this album, and now I disagree with myself. So I'm just going to say that it's all together now, and I'm going to leave it at that. So, yeah. I think my favorite song they added is Hey Bulldog. I think that was pretty obvious I was going to say that based on the fact that I said Back in the USSR was one of the best songs on the White Album last time. Hey Bulldog is great. I love a strong piano riff, and I really like that John and Paul get to be silly in the end. It gets stuck in my head, and I like that, you know, it's just a fire song. From the second I heard it, I was in love with it, and so, Hey Bulldog. Best song on this album. Alright, now we're in the home stretch, and I'm actually going to go not in order of release, but I'm going to go in order of recording because I want to save the best for last. So we're going to go with Let It Be first. Choosing a least favorite song on this one's kind of easy because I did put some weird songs on here in true Beatles fashion. I just want to say, dig it. That's probably my least favorite. I usually do not listen to that song if it comes up on my playlist. I like the scene in the Get Back documentary that Dig It happens better than the Dig It song. Maggie May is second to last because I really wish they finished the song. They just leave it without finishing it, and I don't know the Maggie May other than this version, so I don't know how Maggie May ends, and I've never, you know, to me Maggie May ends unresolved, and that'll forever be what it is, but Dig It takes the cake for least favorite. Favorite song is actually really hard because they're all pretty good, but I think I've Got a Feeling is my favorite song on this album. It changes. This album fluctuates probably the most of songs that I think are the best on it, for me anyway. But at the moment, it's I've Got a Feeling. I really like how it turns into a round in the end, and I think it's really good, and it's just fun to sing, you know? I've got a feeling. I probably just copyrighted this video by singing that. I just want to give a special shout out to Two of Us. That song is really pretty. That song was like one of the first songs that got me into Let It Be. Across the Universe. I mean, what can you say about Across the Universe? That song is just beautiful. The Long and Winding Road, I think, is really pretty. I'm one of the people who's a fan of the more orchestral version of this song with all the strings. I kind of think that it enhances it. I know this is kind of a controversial opinion, but I like this version of The Long and Winding Road. I like the other version too. I like the simple version as well, but this version, I don't think is terrible. I don't see why people hate it. The song that takes the cake for my favorite song on Let It Be is I've Got a Feeling. And now I've saved the best for last. My favorite Beatles album, the Beatles album that was the last Beatles album that they released, well, not released, that they recorded as the Beatles, which is the iconic Abbey Road. Yay! We've made it all the way to the end. Abbey Road is the end of the Beatles. So sad, but they really went out with a bang, didn't they? This is my favorite Beatles album. I could listen to this album front to back, over and over, but like more than all the other ones because it's just so good. But unfortunately, there must be a least favorite, and that's actually pretty easy. I'm just gonna say it's Her Majesty. I know it's kind of a cop-out because it's like 2 seconds long, and I actually kind of love it. In a way, it's kind of like a little troll at the end of the album, which I kind of appreciate. Just because it's easy, I'm gonna say Her Majesty because all the other songs are so good. But I think my favorite song on this album is actually 3 songs. It is Gold Slumbers Carry That Weight in the End. That whole trilogy, I think, is such a good end cap to their final album. It's like the final part of the album, and it's just such a good way to end it. It's like a stellar ending. I also want to give a special shout out to Sun King, Me, Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, that other medley they have. That is, I'm a medley fan. I think it's fun that the songs just kind of phase into one another. I think it's a pretty fun thing to do. You Never Give Me Your Money, that song I think is really underrated, and it really has a bop. I just want to also give a special shout out to Octopus's Garden, Ringo's other song, which I think is a really good song. He really brought it for Octopus's Garden. He figured something out. Best love song of all time, in my opinion, is Something by George Harrison. That is his best song, in my opinion. I love Something. It is so good. It would be my favorite on the album if not Golden Slumbers Carry That Weight in the End being a perfect ending. That's Abbey Road, my favorite album by the Beatles. So thank you everybody for coming on this journey. I rambled for so long because I just have such an ability to talk about the Beatles. I could talk about the Beatles for as much time as you were willing to listen to me, and then I could probably talk about it for a few hours longer. So thank you for letting me sit in front of this camera and ramble about the Beatles for a minute. It feels good to do it because it's just one of my favorite things to talk about. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was interesting to you. It was interesting to me, and I'm probably the only one who cares, but it was fun to make. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next one. Bye!